Long ago, nestled between rolling hills and a vast, untamed forest, there lay a village known as Tambira. The villagers lived simple lives, farming, fishing, and gathering fruit from the edges of the dense woodland. But though the forest provided them with food and medicine, they dared not venture too deep within. It was said that the forest belonged to the spirits. The elders warned that those who trespass beyond the first few trees would never return, or worse, they would return changed. Some believed that deep within the trees, powerful creatures, neither human nor animal, watched in silence, deciding the fate of those who entered their domain. Maria, however, had always felt different. From the time she was a child, she had been drawn to the whispering trees, the sweet scent of wildflowers, and the gentle hum of unseen insects. While other children played in the fields, Maria would sit by the edge of the forest, watching the sun filter through the thick canopy. Her mother, an old healer who knew the uses of plants and roots, often scolded her. "Maria, you are too curious for your own good. The forest does not welcome humans." But her father, a skilled hunter, would chuckle and say, "Let her be, wife. She has the heart of a wanderer. Perhaps one day, she will learn the language of the trees." As Maria grew older, her fascination with the forest only deepened. She began sneaking into its depths, carefully stepping between twisted roots and brushing her fingers against moss-covered bark. She listened to the songs of the birds and the distant rustling of unseen creatures. One morning, after a long night of rain, Maria decided to explore further than she ever had before. The earth was damp beneath her feet, and the air smelled of wet leaves and fresh life. She wandered deeper and deeper, entranced by the beauty around her, until she found herself standing before an enormous baobab tree. Its trunk was wider than any she had ever seen, its roots twisting like the fingers of an ancient giant. As she marveled at the tree, she heard a sound, a deep, rhythmic breathing. She turned and gasped. There, half hidden by the shadows of the undergrowth, was a massive gorilla. Its dark fur glistened with raindrops, and its powerful arms rested against the ground. But what struck Maria most were its eyes, deep, knowing, almost human in their expression. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Maria had seen gorillas before, but never one so large, so imposing, and yet so still. She should have run, should have screamed for help, but something in the creature's gaze held her in place. Slowly, she took a step backward, her heart pounding. The gorilla did not move. It only watched. Finally, Maria turned and hurried back toward the village, her mind racing. For days, Maria could think of nothing but the gorilla. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw its solemn gaze. She told no one, fearing they would forbid her from entering the forest again. But her curiosity won in the end. She returned to the great baobab tree the next morning, carrying a small basket of ripe bananas and mangoes. She waited, wondering if the creature would appear again. Just as she was about to give up, she heard the same deep breathing. Turning slowly, she saw the gorilla emerge from the trees. This time, Maria did not back away. Instead, she knelt and placed the fruit on the ground before stepping back. The gorilla watched her carefully, then, after a long pause, it reached forward, took a banana, and peeled it with surprising gentleness. Maria smiled. Day after day, she returned to the forest, bringing small offerings of food. Over time, the gorilla grew more comfortable in her presence. It would sit near her, watching as she spoke softly about her village, her dreams, and her love for the forest. Though the beast never spoke, Maria felt that it understood. It was not just an animal, it was something more. A guardian, perhaps. A spirit in the form of a beast. One evening, as Maria walked back to the village, she realized the gorilla was following her. At first, she thought it would stop at the forest edge, but to her astonishment, it continued, stepping out into the open fields. The moment she entered the village, shouts erupted. The men grabbed their spears, the women pulled their children away, and the elders gasped in horror. "Maria! What have you done?" her mother cried. The gorilla remained still, watching the villagers with its deep, calm eyes. But the people saw only a monster. "You have brought a beast among us," shouted one of the elders. "This is an omen of misfortune." Maria raised her hands. "No, please. It means no harm. It is gentle." But the villagers were afraid. They demanded that the gorilla be chased away. Maria pleaded with them, but her voice was drowned out by the growing panic. The men advanced with their spears, and at last, the gorilla turned and retreated back into the forest. Maria's heart ached as she watched it disappear among the trees. That night, Maria lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her hut. She knew the villagers would never understand. To them, the gorilla was nothing more than a wild beast, a danger. But to her, it was a friend. The next morning, she went to the forest, but the gorilla was nowhere to be found. Days passed, then weeks, and still, there was no sign of it. Maria began to fear that it was gone forever. But one evening, as she sat at the edge of the forest, a familiar rustling made her heart leap. She turned and saw it, her silent guardian, standing just beyond the trees. Tears filled her eyes. She knew then that though the village would never accept the creature, it would always watch over her. And so, Maria continued to visit the forest, speaking to the unseen presence among the trees. She never saw the gorilla again, but she knew it was there, watching, protecting. Years passed, and Maria grew older. She became a healer like her mother, tending to the sick with herbs and roots. But she never forgot the great beast that had once been her friend. She told her children and grandchildren the story of the spirit of the forest, the guardian who had once walked among them, misunderstood and feared. And though no one ever saw the great gorilla again, the people of Tambara began to treat the forest with greater respect, knowing that somewhere among the trees, the spirit still watched, waiting for the day when humans would no longer fear what they did not understand. And so, the legend of Maria and the spirit of the forest lived on, whispered in the wind and carried through the generations, a reminder that not all who are different are to be feared, and that sometimes, the truest friendships are found in the most unexpected places.